Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Good evening, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you're joining me tonight or after on one of the many podcast platforms where this show is archived, along with all of the other shows of the Untold Radio Network, all of which are fantastic. And if for some reason you only do watch and listen to Talking Weird, maybe you should go and check out some of those other shows as well. I've had another really busy week. Anybody who watches and listens regularly knows that I'm making a feature documentary about Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver and the creation of modern UFO belief called The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, and that I have a kind of small abridged component of that documentary screening at film festivals at the moment. I got into about another 7 film festivals in the last week, so that requires getting deliverables to the festivals. There are 2 coming up this week for anybody watching. This Friday, which is Friday the 13th, hopefully that's a good omen and not a bad one, we're screening at Sydney Underground Film Festival in Sydney, Australia at the Dendy Cinema Newtown, which is my old stomping ground. I used to screen festivals there, which I used to run when I lived in Australia. It's a wonderful venue in a wonderful part of that country. And we're also in Chehalis, Washington at the Northwest Flying Saucer Film Festival, which is part of the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party, which will also be fantastic. And you can find out more of those if you go to my Facebook page for The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers and the Shaver Mystery, which you can either go to Facebook and search for The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, or just put into your address, Google bar tab, whatever, theshavermystery.com, theshavermystery.com, and that'll take you to that Facebook page where all of the many screenings which are upcoming are taking place. I'd love any audience members who can get to some of those screenings to see them as well. As I mentioned, there's a lot more in September and a bunch in October as well coming up and onwards. I'm delighted to have the guest back I'm having tonight. I've been on his show a couple of times, and he's been on with me at least 2 or 3 times before. He's a fantastic human being. I love chatting to him. He's a writer and experiencer who is well known for his popular shows, Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob, Beyond BMR, and Late Night. All are available in his YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube at Bigfoot Michigan Rob. That's at Bigfoot Michigan Rob. And he's visiting with me today to talk about his brand new book, True Cryptid Encounters Book 2, which is the follow-up to his successful book from last year. And we had him on about a year ago to talk about that one, if you want to go back in the Untold Radio archives and check that out after tonight's show. And he's going to be sharing some of the remarkable experiences that that book covers, including all kinds of strange Bigfoot and Dogman sightings tonight. And he only recently did Coast to Coast AM, which was a great show where he talked about some of those things as well. At any rate, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back to the show Rob Karnafel, also known as Bigfoot Michigan Rob.
Hey, hi, Dean.
Man, it's great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Well, you sound like a busy guy yourself with Sydney. You're going to be down in Australia pretty soon, hey? Back and forth.
I'd love to be there. The film will be there without me, unfortunately. I would have loved to have gone to Chehalis this weekend, but they're both Friday night, and actually the day my daughter's homeschool tutorial group starts this year. So she goes every week to this fairly intense tutorial group, which is a big part of the program. And I can't pull her out the first week she's back for the year. It would be doing her a disservice, or I would have been in Chiapas for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a bunch. Hopefully there'll be one near you at some stage, and I can twist your arm into going in.
Yeah, no, that'd be nice. I mean, I do get invites to go to a lot of different what do you call them, conferences around here, but every time I get asked for something, I got something else going on. It seems like you never fit things in. That's why maybe next October, me and the group I'm with, I think you might know a little about this. We might be putting together our own conference.
That's so exciting.
I'm going to keep that under wraps a little bit, but we're working on it. Yeah. So, but yeah, because I enjoy going. What I enjoy most is meeting the people. Especially, it's really doubly enjoyable when you meet people that kind of know you. I still get humbled by that. Hey, I'm like, oh, I know you from your show or whatever. So it's kind of you take a step back from that, certainly.
Oh yeah, I
you
bet.
take it in, much like yourself. Anytime you get recognized for anything little, you're most, wow, that person, really does watch the show or
Yeah,
read the book or
that's
whatever.
true. I think you probably need to have that "I'm almost famous" T-shirt. I'm not really almost famous, but so
Yeah, well, I'm not close. I'm not that close. In my home state, in my city I live in, maybe, because I noticed, I look on my analytics that I've got like most of all, the biggest town that watches my show is right here where I live.
Oh wow, that's great.
It's pretty good. And then it's in second place. Just take a guess.
Somewhere in Texas.
Los Angeles,
Huh.
then Dallas.
I wasn't too far. Well, I was third. I was Dallas. I figured because you were part of the kind of the Tex front porch crew.
Yeah,
and-
well, that's yeah, but LA's so big. I guess they listen to anything. I mean, that's talk about talking weird. LA, right?
When you're at conferences and people recognize you, you also get people coming up to you and telling you their own stories, because we're about to
Yeah.
talk about a book you wrote with people's stories.
Yes, yeah. Yes, it never goes without fail, especially when you have we'll sometimes do a meet and greet, or I'll attend a meet and greet at a conference. And yeah, I'll sit down and people will just, tell me an experience they had. And, and you really take it in and listen to these people, because a lot of these people, maybe not so much half, have had some have had some traumatic experiences, and they really want to ear to bend, because, these conferences are safe places, much like the show is a safe place. The people that I compiled the stories for, and I always say stories, although they're actual true encounters, right, that I published for them. But I just remember, the reason I saw the show and started writing books or the YouTube channel is because, as I told you many times, Dean, what happened to me set me. I thought I was losing my mind, and I had nobody to reach out and help me. I got lucky, and now this is kind of set me on this course, what I'm doing today, right? So there's a plan for everybody.
Well, no, I agree with that. I think there's things that certain people are meant to do, and we sometimes tend to almost fall into it inadvertently without even planning some of these things in life.
I think that's really true. I mean, I didn't plan on, even my entire life, I've never had each step of my life planned out, other than I always knew I was going to college. That was, of course, a certainty, right? But didn't know I was going to work after that. Then I ended up working in the automotive field. Then I bought a bar business. And then, lo and behold, I'm doing podcasting and writing books. Never thought I'd do that. Although I did write a book when I was 26 years old. It was about a vampire.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that lived on a beach. It's not like Twilight. I'd say it would have been out well before Twilight, except mine wasn't romance. It was about this Gabriella, was the name of this vampire coven in the Pacific Northwest, well before I even knew anything about Bigfoot like I know today. And I gotta tell you, it was so far or long ago that I had the old computer. You remember the boxy computer, and you had to save everything, before you shut it off or you'd lose it.
Mhm.
and we had an electrical storm, and I was up in the attic typing, and I was almost done with this book. It was about 380 pages long. Oh boy. Electrical storm, zap, lost the power, lost the whole book, and I didn't have it backed up to anything.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's heartbreaking.
that was hard. Oh my gosh, it was heartbreaking indeed. I'm a man and all, but I could have cried because I'm like, what am I going to do? There's no way I can remember this, and my notes were haphazard, mostly in the computer anyway. You know, some legal pad notes perhaps, but the thoughts that I put into the book that I actually typed out, you can't recapture that.
Yeah, that'd almost destroy some people.
Oh boy. Well, yeah. I said, well, I'm not going to do this ever again. And lo and behold, 20 years later, 30 years later, I wrote 2 now.
Are you super careful with your backups these days? Like,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
very. Yeah, I double back up everything. It's like, okay, today's computer system, though, hell, you can't lose. It's hard to lose anything. I mean, you try to lose something and you can't. Now it seems like, unless you purposely delete it in triplicate. That's what
yeah, I'm always paranoid of something like, I don't know, like an electrical storm destroying my computer or like the house burning down. So, for example, the film I'm always talking about at the moment,
Oh yeah.
I have a backup of that entire, like, or not just the film cut, but all of the original footage off property. Like, I have it. It's actually at my girlfriend's house. I have a copy of that film, and I
Okay.
normally carry a copy of it myself whenever I go anywhere as well. Not that I'm expecting that. Not that I would ever want my house to burn down. But can you imagine losing 2 years worth of work because you
Oh
didn't
no.
think to have it off site? So,
No.
um,
Well, I tell you what, things that are the most precious or the most valuable or the most something that I can ill afford to lose, which are both the manuscripts of my books. I got those. I send that to like my brother, so it's also stored on his computer,
good idea.
just in case. Then objects or items. I think I got myself one of those storage boxes at the bank, security box for certain
Good idea.
valuables.
Good idea. Yeah, the problem is, of course, with video files is they're so incredibly big. Otherwise, I would just store them in the cloud. But my internet's so slow, it would take forever to upload the size of
Yeah.
the file of a raw 4K, like, hundreds of hours of raw footage. But what I do when I'm writing an article or I'm writing something, I just email copies to myself regularly, because then it's sitting in Yahoo or wherever. So I know whatever
Yep.
happens, I just go back into the Yahoo and there's the
You
file.
find it. Mhm.
Yeah, so but anyway, I'm sure our audience don't want to hear me talking about backup strategies. This isn't like
Yeah.
PC 101.
Right. There we go.
Your new books, I think your new book has even more interesting stories than the last book. And the last book was great as well. So the first book was True Cryptid Encounters, and this is True Cryptid Encounters Book 2. And
Yeah.
for those of you watching, that cover's by our mutual friend,
Yeah.
Jason McLean. That's a great cover.
Yeah. Isn't it? It really pops, and it's much like the book 1 cover, which but we what we did was it's kind of the same. Was actually the same, but we mirrored it and we changed the colors. But if you notice that the werewolf and the alleged Bigfoot there, we swapped them. We switched sides. So yeah, a slight hint, a subtle hint, change.
They're nice companion pieces, actually, to each other. Like, I mean, not just the
Yeah.
content, but the covers
Sure.
go really,
Yeah.
really nicely together. So we were talking before about people approaching you and talking to you at conferences. Were most of these stories, or these true encounters, which are in these books, were most of those letters to you, or how did you put most of them together?
These I got from a couple different sources, not from any conference. Conference, was just chilling out and just listening to people's stories, and never thought about the books. In fact, a lot of these that I've gotten were from emails sent in to me from people that happen to follow the channel. Now you got to remember, this channel has been up now for 3 years, and this is really the first full year. I didn't even think I was going to do a book at all. I was just getting emails, but I saved them all. And also I would get stories sent in to me by people that are actual subscribers to the channel. So those are my 2 biggest sources. And so I just sat on all these and I said, I'm reading through all these encounters. And so I started calling people if they or emailing them back or whatever, or going on Messenger, wherever I could contact them. And, you know, would you like me to do a video on my show on this? Some people, yeah, that'd be cool. Just don't give out my name. Because I must admit that the reason I get the email is because people don't want to come on the show. They want to be, everything's in anonymity, right? They don't want to show their face, give out their name, where they live. And that's 90% of these are those actual people that just want to live, you know, and have nobody know their business, but they want their business shared under a different name. Fine. So I started contacting these people, and then I started doing the videos for a while. And I said, man, I should put, these are all, I could probably compile short stories on all these events. People need to hear this stuff, much like I wanted people to hear mine, right? So I had the idea to throw a book together. And I had so much information, you know, that I had enough for 2 books. So that's kind of how that. So I got a hold of the people. Some people were all on board. Some people were, well, you know, some people wanted compensation and money. Well, no, listen here, you know, I'm not a rich guy. I mean, if you want your story in a book, I'll provide it for you.
Right.
It's what you're getting, you know?
No, I totally get it. When you obviously have, I'm imagining, a mass of these type of letters. When you were choosing ones for the book, was there kind of a curation process? Was it like, well, I want a scattering of different things, or I want something thematic going through it, or do I want representation from all different states, or all varied kind of encounter reports? What kind of drove you when you were making those decisions?
It's a great question, because as the first time doing anything like this, I started the process over several times, because then I realized that, I had way too many Bigfoot stories, way too many from Michigan, none from California, you know, none from Texas, too many from Kentucky. Oh my God, I got 50 Bigfoot stories and 2 Dogman stories. I mean, and that's a little exaggerated, but you just get the fact that I try to even it out. So yeah, it was a process of trying to hit on every state, because now in both books now, I'm proud to say, except for Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, I think almost every state's representative with some sort of phenomenon, except for a lot of the New England states, not too many. So it's a lot of the lower 48 and Alaska even, and of course, it's mostly cryptid encounters, but this last book's really interesting because I've got an alien abduction story in it, which is just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a couple paranormal ones. And the second book tends to be, I would say it's 63% maybe Dogman and the rest Bigfoot. The first book was a little more Bigfoot.
Right.
So this one has got a few more Dogman tales in it, because that seems to be the flavor, and that's the one that really petrifies people.
Yeah, I noticed that about this book, actually, and we'll talk about that abduction story in a minute, because it was one of the more bizarre and just totally absorbing stories within the book. They all are, but this was a particularly strange one. Back to you going through everything you're looking at and curating, even things which didn't make it into the book. Maybe were there differences regionally that you noticed? Like, were there, okay, I have more reports of this from, you know, this state or this area, and I have more stories that are like this from this place, or more cryptids seem to appear here than there? Or...
Well, first of all, being from Michigan, I got a lot of Michigan stories now, and I didn't put every Michigan story in the book because I just didn't want to have 20 Michigan stories. So a lot from Michigan, that's my number one state for getting these. But I always found that for me, it's been the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, you know, and then out, not too, and, you know, of course, the Pacific Northwest, Colorado. Those are like the primary ones. Like the New England and East Coast, really not too much. So Midwest, North Central, like Montana area, all the way over to you know, the Washington State and such. It's evenly. That's the even disbursement in the book, and that's kind of how it went. But Michigan by far And I think it's because I live in Michigan. But I will tell you this, of all the Michigan accounts that I got sent into me, 90% were a Dogman.
That's perhaps not that surprising because and Wisconsin as well. Really, Wisconsin and Michigan are really the heart of Dogman, or at least historically they are. In fact, if you watch the old Monster Quest, which Doug Hychek, who's the brains behind the Untold Radio Network, is a wonderful show. Those ones which they did on Wolfman and Dogman type entities, they're all in Wisconsin and Michigan. So when you rewind this 10 years ago, it seemed like the majority of these things, now I know people seeing them everywhere, but there was, of course, the Beast of Bray Road down south, which Linda Godfrey did all that work investigating early on. And then there was the Michigan Dogman is really where the phrase comes from, right? So you and I are really in the heart of Dogman territory, me being in Wisconsin, you being in Michigan. Yeah,
and in fact, one of the stories I was going to tell you for the book is from Wisconsin. Probably a place you might be familiar with. State Park, Buckhorn State Park, Wisconsin.
Oh, do you want to tell readers that story?
Yeah, I'll tell you about. Yeah, I got most of them. When I do the shows, I tell them from memory instead of reading them because that's people tend to get bored. But I can remember. But you always just have to put on the thinking cap and remember. There's so many. I don't remember all of them. Trust me, I got to prepare them most of the time. But yeah, so this is Buckhorn, Wisconsin, and State Park. And this is now actually this story. What I love, you asked me a great question that I kind of didn't answer fully. The stories that you'll find in the book are not just about creepy accounts with a Bigfoot or a dog or a Dogman. It's ones that also like kind of have the human element to them, where something really affected a family, and a lot of times positive, sometimes negative as well. So I do like to kind of find those feel good or tragedy type stories because to play on the hearts of people, right? Because we all want to be entertained, but we also want to feel the person's story. So I find the human element stories are the best.
And that's why they're so powerful, by the way. So many of these stories in their book they're absolutely like that. That people have they can have terrible, long-lasting effects. And you know why I like that in your book quickly? Then I'll throw back to you, because so often we talk about paranormal or cryptid encounters just as these brief moments in somebody's life. But the reality is the psychological and emotional and sometimes physical impacts of these experiences, as the book points out, your book does so well with all these stories, they can last a lifetime.
Yeah. And actually this story really kind of hits on all those topics. And it was, again, in Wisconsin at the state park, Buckhorn. And so there was these two friends, their names I forget. I'm just going to go with Bobby and Rory as the two boys. But they were friends growing up through high school, and they were excited because they both got accepted to the university. Now, I got to preface this by telling everybody that the father sent me the email about his son and his son's friend. He did not tell him what university. He only mentioned the state park, which he was kind of reluctant to even tell me that. And later there's like a hospital that they had to visit that he wouldn't give me that or anything of that nature. So the guy was pretty tight-lipped about it. But as he pens me this, he even tells me in the email as he strokes the keyboard, his fingers are trembling. And he goes on to tell me that it took him 2 months to type out this email to me because this is just how traumatic it's been for this father. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Put the coffee on and start reading this, right? So they're off to college, and so the Bobby and Rory, they tell the parents, hey, we want to go camping, and it's our last weekend, it's our last summer off before we hit college. And they told them where they wanted to go, and so the dad goes, well, I'll join you boys. And the boys like, no, Dad, hey, listen, we're off to college now, we're men now, right? And they joked on that they wanted to go out and be bushmen for the weekend, right? And then before they get off to college. So the dad goes, okay, just, tell me where exactly you're going to be. And so I know just so I know where your whereabouts are, your location. They're like, fine, Dad, whatever. And so these two young guys go out camping. The dad suggested they rent a cabin nearby, and they said, no, Dad, we're going to rough it again. So they went and got a tent and did their thing. So they left on a Friday morning, about 8 a.m., and off we go. Bobby and Rory, they're off to the state park in Wisconsin. The parents, both sets of parents, Bobby's parents and Rory's parents, were both told they'd be home early Monday around noon. Okay, well, very well. So, okay, we'll look forward to seeing you boys back at noon Monday or whatever, somewhere around that time. So the weekend rolls on, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Monday rolls around, and the father's all anxious, so he calls his sons, or he calls his son, excuse me. And the wife says, it's 8 a.m. My gosh, you're not even going to get a connection. I mean, the boys said they'll be home around noon. Well, let's try to call. He calls, and of course, there's no answer. And I don't think that you could get much. If you're calling somebody in the middle of the woods, you get a crappy connection anyway, because I've tried it on accident. I've called my brother when he's been in the middle of the forest of Michigan, and you don't get through.
You should see, even where I live out here, the cell phone coverage is terrible.
Yeah. Okay. And I imagine this is in Wisconsin too. Whereabouts located to you, I don't know. But so, yeah. So, okay, fine. And Danny tells the wife, yeah. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the kids aren't back. Bobby Rory's not back. It's 1. So Bobby's dad got a hold of Rory's dad, and they got together, a little bit worried. And they said, yeah, well, maybe they'll be pulling up any time now. So now at this point, you guys, it's 6 o'clock p.m. and no sign of the boys. So both sets of parents, Rory and Bobby's parents, they get together and they go to the camp location. They had an idea of where the kids were camping, but certainly not where the actual spot was. I don't know how you can find them, but they gave them some coordinates, I guess. That's on the book. I don't have the details on how they got the location pinpointed. So they get there and they see Rory's car. It was empty, of course. They weren't in it. And so they said, well, here they parked here. So they trekked into the woods somewhere from here. They found a couple sets of trails in which to go down. So they picked a trail, and the families, the sets of parents, they traveled down the trail. They say they're in the email. This is where the father tells me this is where the story really gets tough for him. And as he's in it, he comes across the tent. There's the kid's tent. And they're like, cool. And then they start yelling, Rory, Bobby, yelling their names out, but there's no answer. And before they get closer to the tent, they notice that their area was completely disheveled. Stuff was strewn all over the place. And it was very unkept, like a tornado whipped through there, says the dad. Lots of animal tracks. Nothing, but they were looking for wolf prints, dog, wolf, bear, whatever. I don't even know what they have in Wisconsin, but looking for all sorts of prints. Just a bunch of deer prints, and they get up close to the tent, and they open the tent, and lo and behold, Bobby and Roy are sitting like Indian style with their legs crossed in the tent. And the dad is like, why in the heck didn't you guys hear us out there calling your names? And then he noticed something odd about the boys, as they both were like rocking back and forth in this Indian style sitting position, staring straight ahead. And they were totally in a state of deep shock. The dad's looking at him square in the face. He kind of takes his hand and kind of hits him on the side of the cheeks to kind of snap him out of it. And both boys are not saying a word. They're just rocking back and forth, back and forth. Of course, the moms see their boys. They start getting all upset, start shaking them. I mean, you know how moms or parents, I guess, in general can be. I get that. And then all of a sudden, Bobby's friend Rory, all he says is, no, Bob, excuse me, it's Bobby. This one kid, Bobby, not Rory. Bobby yells, werewolf. Werewolf, he says twice, something like that. And the parents are just like in shock. What are you saying? He's yelling werewolf. And the other boy is not saying anything. And the parents are confused. I mean, werewolf, where's he coming up with this from? So they get out of the tent, and they get the kids out of the tent, and they get them into the parents' vehicle, and they're going to take them to the hospital, have them checked out, right? And again, the men now take a fuller investigation around their campsite, just looking for any evidence or clues, but they really don't find anything that was odd. Smaller rodents and some deer tracks, but it was very odd how they knew their boys weren't the type of guys who just wrecked their camp area. It was just destroyed. So something they did that, they were thinking, but they just can't get over this werewolf that one of the boys had mentioned. So they get to the hospital, and now this is where the father tells me he can't really give me the diagnosis. He doesn't want to tell me the full story of what the doctor had to say, other than both boys suffer very deep traumatic stress-related incident where they did come across something. What the doctors and later on psychiatrists, this one kid ended up going to a psychiatrist and a neurologist, which was saying that there's some deep-seated in the back of his mind, something happened that he cannot release. But the bad thing about this one story is the story even gets a little bit worse, because the one son, Bobby, Dr. Dean, he doesn't even still speak. I mean, he speaks. He dropped out of college, couldn't handle the college life. So that's done. He sits in his bedroom. He's a hermit, doesn't socialize. He speaks with his mom and dad, yes, but he's just 100% opposite. The kid, which was full of life, going to university, all of a sudden is now taking a dramatic step backwards, 380 degrees, 360 degrees. Make matters worse, though, his other friend, Rory, same thing, which happened to him, obviously. He went through the same thing, saw a variety of doctors. He took it one step further, where he asphyxiated himself in his parents' garage in a car.
Gosh.
And the only thing the dad says, I have to end this here. I can't get too many. I'm not getting into the really personal details what the doctors tell me about my son, other than it's very disturbed. Something disturbing happened to him. And if he ever pulls out of it, he says he'll give me an email. And of course, he said, if you want to put this on a video or on a book or something, because he already knew I had book one. In fact, this is one of the late installments in the book. Most of the stuff I told you was over a year old. This was pretty fresh, what this man told me. And this happened to his child back in like 2018 or 2022. So to this day, I mean, a kid, both two sons, well, one took his life, rest his soul, and the other one now is just not who he was. But so the werewolf thing is what perplexes me. That's the mystery. And I posed the question. I'm not a psychiatrist, and that's why these stories are fascinating. Who knows what this was? There's certainly no evidence of a werewolf or a dogman in this state park. The only reason this is even in the book, it says werewolf, which makes it all that intriguing, right? But the dad thinks that something evil lurks in that forest, and he thinks it probably was. As the dad's going on to do further research, he found out about Dogman, Bigfoot, elementals, this, that, and the other. So now he's thinking that something paranormal overtook them.
Yeah, I think the denouement to that story, the ending where one of the young men is essentially mentally and emotionally compromised for the rest of his life, and the other one takes his life, really, again, bangs home the the potency that some paranormal experiences or cryptid experiences have upon people. And by the way, as you were saying, we do have all kinds of things in Wisconsin. We have bear and bobcat and cougar come through here, and wolf, and I think there's even some moose population starting again up north that's wandered down. So there's all kinds of weird things here, but certainly wolf. We have even wolf predation where I live, and I'm not like crazy high north. We have wolf predation. We have wolf predation here, so it's a creepy, strange part of the world. What interested me particularly with this book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more in this one than in the previous one, is there seemed to be more of a paranormal tinge to a lot of these stories. Is that accurate?
I think you could say that'd be pretty accurate. I think that would be very accurate. A lot of the ones. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for example, like the abduction one you were talking about. That
story. Oh yeah. Well, alien abduction. Yeah, I find a lot of. I can tell you that one here in a minute, but
yeah, we can chat a little first, and then I'd love for you to tell the audience.
Yeah, I'll tell you. That's a pretty good. That's a fascinating story. It really is. But I do find, and again, when you're throwing the books together, because a lot of these stories they could have been in book one and vice versa. That's how many I have amassed, right? So I have found that. I would easily say that 60% of them have a paranormal element. If you take them all together, there's 100 stories. I'll say 60 out of 40 are definitely some sort of paranormal element. And there might be a few extra ones in this second book. In fact, the second book's fascinating because there's 10 or 12 less stories, but they're all longer. And the words are the same. The stories itself are 2 and 3 pages instead of maybe 3 and 4 pages versus 2 and 3, like the first book. Gotcha. So but they're a little more in depth. I mean, well, the first book has depth to it as well, but these seem to be a little bit longer. But yes, you're correct. There's, I think, a lot more paranormal element in this book.
Like there's beings going invisible, people seeing footprints, which I'm not going to go into it now, but I've had an encounter where I saw what looked like footprints and there was nothing there when I was in my teens. But there's stories like that in here. There's stories about transparent beings. There's stories about beings disappearing. There's the abduction type experience, things related to orbs and potential UFOs. And so, and to be honest, they're the stories which are more in my wheelhouse, as you were aware. I love these stories which, drift into the other realms of the weird and the paranormal and, the anomalous as well.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. And there are the orbs. There's a story about orbs coming down from the mountains, manifesting into human-like monsters with men with faces on horseback, headless horsemen. There's it was from the there's one I think from Mount St. Helens, which is a very strange paranormal place in there. So there's a lot of it's more of a variety. It's a lot of variety in book 2. I will say that. Yeah, and with the variety.
No, there absolutely is, and maybe if we get to a couple more, this would be another one I'd love you to tell, as well as the abduction one, is the one about the militant Dogman, the one about deep underground military bases and experimentations. And
yeah, that's a pretty deep one too. I have to review that one, but I will. I can thumb through it. But the one too though, which is just as creepy, which I find again very strange. And you and I, we like, I like a good alien abduction story. I believe that we're not the only life form on this planet. I think there's other things out there, whether you want to call them aliens, angels, or demons, like some people suggest. I don't know, but I think there's other life form. I think there's UFOs, that exist. So I seen a UFO as a kid, right? I mean, not saying it was alien, but it was unidentified. But yeah, so this story really struck home. We've heard a lot of those alien abduction stories. What's the one most popular where the guy ended up ruining his life? Wasn't that Travis Walton?
Yeah, The Fire in the Sky is his book.
Yeah, of course. That's I think many of us have seen that, and so it's like, wow, And this story is not suggesting it's that at all, but I felt bad for this woman. I mean, and she still walks today seeking answers. And ever since she was a child, she was always having these dreams. Ever since like 5 or 6 years old, she would always have the same dream. And every night she would say, Mommy and Daddy were on their bedroom and said she was having dreams. Or even saying that there were people visiting her in the night, right? And she would always say she was always in a they were always excuse me, let me backtrack. There was always something coming to her at night as a 5 or 6 year old child, these dreams. And she was always scared and always went to her mom and dad, and they always would tell her, look, you're having a dream. It's not monsters, it's your imagination. So always put her child off to sleep. Now, as she got a little bit older now into her teenage and beyond years, these dreams were about her always waking up on a gurney or in a hospital bed surrounded by these alien beings in a room with 4 walls, white bright walls like a cube. And she says it completely in the story to me, that they were tall and they look just like the alien gray that we've all known and seen, with the big eyes. And they were all a variety of and there was always one alien being that had equipment in his hand, like medical apparatus, and he was always working in her private area. And this dream, she continued to have these same dreams all of the time, over and over again. So during this time, she thinks she's kind of going crazy. In fact, she got divorced from her husband, and she had 2 daughters who excommunications, right? They don't talk to her. So she's kind of alone to herself. She's lost several jobs because this has really been a traumatic experience just over dreams. And she's like, Rob, how could these just be dreams? I'm getting visited almost nightly by creatures that are experimenting on me. So one night before bed, she's at the foot of her bed. She's reading a book, and at the foot of her bed, now this time it's different. She's not up in the 4 walls or rooms where she later tells me she thinks it was an actual craft, but she has an experience with one of these alien grays appears at the foot of her bed and says to her, tonight after you fall asleep, we will give you your answers. And she's looking at this thing in her bedroom, same one that she thought she was seeing or knew she was seeing in her dreams. And she's like, how am I going to fall asleep? You're here now. And they're talking out verbal, not orally. It's all tele in the mind, telepathics or telepathy. I'm sorry. So eventually, though, he goes, and the alien gray says, you'll fall asleep. And as soon as he leaves, she drifts off. She's out. Now she's back on this ship. Now, and again, she's in with these 4 alien grays in the white room with the bright white lights. Now, prior to me going further with this story, this woman had been going to a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, and she also attended and tried to have something removed on the back of her neck because she had, I think it was 6 or 8 nodes or modules that were right in the back of her neck that she felt. They were growths. Didn't know what type of growth. She had gone into the doctors, and the doctors did experimentation, might have taken a biopsy, said it wasn't cancerous, but they didn't know what it was, but they thought it was best not to remove it if it didn't bother her, to keep it in her body, like these 4 or 6 nodes or growths. So she's like, yeah, it doesn't really bother me. I just have to keep my hair long, because you could see a little bump in the back of her neck. So again, back to she's back on this I guess the alleged ship with these four alien beings, and now they telecommunicate to her that yes, we've been taking you all these years ever since childhood. We started visiting you as a 5 and 6 year old human being, little girl, and then continued on until you hit puberty. And then they said that we went ahead and used you and created human hybrid aliens. And she's hearing this and she is just in shock. She's in horror. And they said it, oh, and by the way, if you want an answer to the nodes on the back of your neck, they said there's 6. That represents each of your children. Now, she knows she's not dreaming. She knows she's been abducted, experimented on, used as a incubation center, if you will. And they told her, and they said, don't worry. We understand. We're done with you. We cannot use you any longer. And she says they're telling her, making her feel like, waste a piece of garbage now, right? They said, however, you will meet your child. We have arranged for you to meet one of your children. We won't tell you when. You'll know when it happens. And now all of a sudden she wakes up and she's back in her bed. And now talk about flipping out again. Her daughters will not talk to her. Her husband, long time divorced her. I think both her parents are no longer alive. Hard time holding down a job. How this woman even survives, I don't know. So she's out at a restaurant. She says about a year goes by. And throughout this year time period, she's wondering, and oh, by the way, the dream stopped. They said they were done with her and she never went back on the ship during the night. But now it's in the back of her head. Am I ever going to see one of my children, alleged children? She's in a restaurant, sitting down, having her meal. And then she happens to glance to the left. And there's a very pretty blonde-haired young lady, probably in her early 20s, having dinner by herself. And when she looked at her, she says, Rob, it kind of looked like it could have easily passed for one of my daughters. She said, except this figure was just pristine, flowing blonde hair, blue eyes, and just the skin was just angelic. There's a glow about her skin. And so she's watching this lady. She was, I think maybe she had this gut feeling. This might be what the aliens were telling me. This lady, this younger woman now gets up and goes walking to the restroom in the restaurant. So the woman follows. So this young girl goes in a stall, whatever, to take care of her business, I guess. But she notices now this girl, she's in this stall now for going on 5 or 10 minutes. It's been a long time. So finally, the woman who thinks it's her daughter, she goes over, she looks under the stall, and there's no feet there. There's nothing. Then she even, reluctantly pushes open the door. There's nobody in the stall. And she's like, and she says during this time period, Rob, there might have been one person in and out while she was waiting, but when she went in, it was just the two of them. And in the 5 minutes that she was waiting, maybe a couple other people came in, but that was it. So she leaves. She goes back to where she was sat down at the table, and she looks to where the girl was, and her place sitting is all cleared and is ready to go for another customer. And so she leaves, and she's like walking around the parking lot, and she's just beside herself. So she goes home that night, and she's off to bed. As I mentioned, she hadn't had any dreams in about a year, ever since they said they were done with her, these aliens. All of a sudden, she's taken again. She's back on the craft with the 4 aliens. But she's not lying on the gurney. She's kind of up in a chair now. Again, they're done working on her. and they said, "We have somebody for you to meet." And appearing from, and they're talking telepathically, then appearing to her, just kind of fades into her view, is the identical woman she saw earlier that day at the restaurant. And now the girl speaks, this time verbally, orally, not I can never say telepathic. There we go. Speaks to her, "I'm your hybrid alien daughter." And then the mother is like, "Will I ever see you again?" And she goes, "Nope, this is the first last time you ever hear from us." "And what about my 5 other children? I had the 6 nodes." Well, she was the only one that they kept, as they said. So take that for what, the only one she kept was this pretty blonde. So that leads to telling me that something to the other 5, they were discarded, I suppose, right?
Gosh.
So yeah, kind of, cruel, right? Cold and cruel. So anyway, and that's where that story ends. And this poor lady, I gotta tell you though, Dean, and I believe the story because this lady, unless I'm just a sucker, she keeps in communications with me. I'm unfortunately like her only pen pal because she's just struggles. She can't hold on to a job. People think she's nuts. I'm not going to call anybody crazy, Dean, because you can call me crazy for what happened to me. So that's the side of the fence I'm on when it comes to these amazing stories, encounters, if you will. So yeah, I mean, I think something happens to everybody in these stories. I mean, what exactly is it? We'll never know since we weren't there.
I've certainly heard stories not unlike that in abduction lore. It's not a story which is that far out of the realm of the way the phenomenon is experienced by people. There was another story in your book as well, which we don't have to go deep into it, but where there was a husband and a wife and their 20-year-old daughter, and they started to see, I think, weird globes, and they took photos of them because the wife was I think photography was a hobby, but she was almost professional level. She started seeing weird faces in the globe, and then these UFOs came and dropped off essentially dogmen. And then the wife lost the child, and the implication was that the child was now running with the dogman, and somehow there'd been an abduction. I mean, that was the implication in the
Yeah,
story. That
exactly. I remember that. Again, yes. I mean, you and I talk ad nauseum a lot about because we've been on each other's shows. A lot of times we share a lot of the same ideas and theories. I will say this, man, all this stuff that we talk about, this talking weird stuff, it's all related to me in some fashion. Wouldn't you have to agree with that?
yeah, it's interconnected. I think it's one of the problems, and there is some improvement, but one of the problems I think within the broader field of people who study the anomalous is over here there are the Bigfoot encrypted people, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe the cryptid people are even different. Maybe there's somebody studying the Loch Ness monster here and Bigfoot here and Dogman up here, but let's just assume for a moment they're kind of interconnected. And then the UFO people are over here, and then the ghost people are over here, and then the demonologists are over here. But somehow I don't think that we've gotten anywhere by parceling all of this strange phenomena out, because again and again we either see stories like the one I just mentioned where there were both dogmen and UFOs and orbs, or the phenomenon itself seems similar when it's, for example, Bigfoot's throwing stones at people or rocks out in the woods, or a house which has poltergeist activity getting stones thrown on the roof, or a strange sulfur smell from ETs, but also from Bigfoot and also from a ghostly apparition. Like there's these phenomenological through lines, as well as stories which seem to contain somebody sees a UFO and then they have poltergeist activity, and then they also saw a Bigfoot the year before. Like it almost seems like there's this very weird other reality which we're interconnected with, and some people seem to be more maybe magnetized, for lack of a better term, to it, and they have all of these different encounters with these different, what we think of as different phenomena, but it might all or think of as different phenomena rather, but it might all be ultimately different kind of, I don't know, pulses coming out from the same root phenomenon. And it just appears, okay, they've had a Bigfoot experience here, but they also saw globes at the same time, and then they saw a UFO, and then they went home and there was poltergeist activity. So maybe these things are far more connected than we think. And some of your stories certainly seem to suggest that in your current book, again, True Cryptid Encounters, book 2.
It does seem that way. It seems like, but you know what I find fascinating too is even like doing the show on YouTube, since I've been doing that for 3 years, and then having different researchers on. There's a lot of commonalities. It always seems up until when you really dig deep into the subject matter, it's always like there's always an orb around at a Bigfoot sighting. It seems not all the time now, doesn't it? I mean, yeah. Or there was a UFO reported, and then there was a Bigfoot a mile away from where an alleged UFO was hovering over the woods. I mean, I don't believe in that really in coincidences hardly that too much. Personally, I think there's a relation there. I mean, you know,
and
and
I
I
think
see
some people are starting to realize it as well. I think like the BFRO used to refuse to do any serious investigations, right, about reports that had multiple things in it. But I think now they've opened up more, is my understanding.
Well, I would hope so, because I spoke to a couple people that used to give them reports or field reports for them, and I know as a fact, because I spoke with one of their guys that's been working there, well, helping them for over 20 years. Say, man, he got out of that. It might have changed since I talked to this guy who was on 2 years ago, but he said that every report he sent in that had to do with high strangeness of any sort was, he said, sanitized. The report was still went out, but if there's anything paranormal in it, that was deleted or rewritten. So, which makes that report a false report.
Yeah.
You know?
John Keel was one of the first people to realize this, who obviously is the author of the Mothman Prophecies and a number of other equally and in some ways more important books. But he realized when he was interviewing people, he'd ask the question, have you had any other strange experiences? Because if somebody goes to do a Bigfoot, like a Bigfoot researcher goes out, they're not going to ask you about ghostly apparitions at your bed late at night or the fact you saw a strange, orb or a UFO. They just want to focus on the Bigfoot. In the same way, somebody who's a UFO investigator doesn't want to know if you saw a ghost, a night afterwards, or if you also happen to see a cryptid in the woods on the way home. But when you ask somebody who's had one of these strange experiences, have you had anything else strange? Apparently, because I'm not an investigator in the field, but apparently it's very common that this experiencer has had other experiences as well of different phenomena.
I believe that. I believe a lot of people have seen, it's funny too, because it seems like if you've seen anything, like when I grew up, man, if at the age of 5 years old, I saw a UFO. And in fact, my mother pointed out to me and my brother, she woke us up from sleeping. I think, however old you are to go into kindergarten, that's how old I was. So, and I said, Mom, why are you waking me up? I know we got another 20 minutes of sleep for kindergarten, I think it was. Mm-hmm. She goes, just get your little butts in the kitchen. I got something to show you. So, me and my brother were, running down the hallway. And sure enough, Dean, hovering in the backyard, probably about up like the size of a football field straight up, probably was hovering this UFO. It looked just like I call a flying saucer. It looked like a flying saucer. It looked like a coffee saucer, where you put a coffee cup on, turned over. That's what it looked like. It reminded me more of one of my favorite shows growing up, Lost in Space. Their flying saucer. It looked just like that.
Great show.
Loved it. Yeah, it was my favorite. And holy cow, Ma, that looks like that's a flying saucer for sure. And we didn't even blink an eye. We actually ran down the stairs, went outside, and we're looking at it. Me and my brother, clear as day. My mom gets on the phone. Yeah, I mean, my mom got on. Listen to this. My mom gets on the phone. My dad worked at Chrysler at the time, and at the time, back in the day, back in the whatever year this was, 70s, I guess. You don't call your husband out at work, off the floor. You just don't do that, right? Unless it's an emergency, something wrong with the kids, right? He's like, what? Of course. Now he all of a sudden gets to the phone. They finally get a hold of my dad. And he's like, what? What happened? Right? I saw a flying saucer. What? Yeah, I'm sure he gave my mom an earful. Hung up the phone. You don't, because back in the day you could get fired for that. They were in the union, but yeah, you're made fun of. That's for sure. If your wife calls you off the floor and your boss is not too happy. So anyway, my dad gets home from work. My mom's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. His name's Bob. Blah blah blah." And the kids saw it too. Come on, tell Dad. And we're like, "Yeah, Dad. Yeah, Dad." He's like, "Yeah, okay, well." Whatever he said, and he went in the living room and turned on the local news. The lead story in my city where I seen it, UFO spotted. They got the UFO, some sort of object spotted hovering in such and such city, and I guess there were calls into the news stations and the radio stations of like 800 people called in.
Wow.
From my location that's seen this thing. So that kind of corroborates. We saw, us and 800 people saw this thing.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So there was something out there. And so, yeah. So
I think that's what your books show, though. They show that there's something out there. When you talk to experiences, it becomes very clear that the world is much different than the way consensus reality paints it.
Absolutely. We live in the world, but do we really know what world we live in? I mean, I think that's odd. It's odd sounding, but I don't think it is. I mean, I think there's more to what's going in the woods. I always put on the back of each book, it says, "Are we not alone in the woods?" And are we not alone in the woods? I don't think we are. And I'm not talking about lions, tigers, and bears. I'm talking about other things that are not supposed to exist, right? And so I believe in that. I do. I think there are things that, there's cryptids we haven't discovered out there, Dr. Dean. You know that. We just don't know them or have not found them.
Yeah, I certainly think reality is, again, far weirder than what we are taught about in school. What a fascinating conversation with you, as it always is, Rob. The hour just flew by, as it does
know.
every time I talk to you. How do people get a hold of your book, though? True Cryptid Encounters.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty easy. If you just say it's on Amazon. All you need to do is on your Amazon browser, just type Bigfoot Mystery Rob, and both of my books, 1 and 2, will pull up. Also on my YouTube page, Bigfoot Mystery Rob YouTube page, I got the links are in that. And all my live shows, I'm on Tuesday night at 9, Thursday afternoon at 1, and Saturday night at midnight. On those shows, the links to the books are in the shows, and of course on my YouTube profile. But the easiest thing, if you don't subscribe or not a YouTuber, Bigfoot Mystery Rob on Amazon. Type that in, and boom, you'll find it.
And they should, because both the books are fascinating. Your shows are always great as well. I love to always catch them whenever I have a chance. They're so great. And no, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with me again tonight. It was such a great pleasure talking to you. Yeah,
it's always great. I got to come back, and there's way more stories to talk about. I just did 2 and what, we got to talking, but, it's fascinating. I'm not tooting my own horn, but if you're into this type of high strangeness, weirdness, cryptids, paranormal, the books are awesome, and they're short stories, very easy to get through. A 13-year-old can read it as well as a 75-year-old. So yeah, it's for everybody. No, I think they're incredibly entertaining and spooky as all get out as well. Oh yeah. So I just loved talking to you, Robin, until I get to talk to you again, until I get to talk to everybody else out there. Please keep it weird. All right, let's do it.